Attempts at Peace in Europe. Kylie Reimer. The Paris Peace Conference was the final step in making peace after the armistice of 1918. It consisted of several treaties agreed upon by the leaders of participating countries. The first and main treaty addressed was the Versailles Treaty. It was designed for Germany in response to their aggression in World War I. Four main leaders discussed the terms of this treaty. USA President Woodrow Wilson. He drafted the 14 points and argued for self-determination and a League of Nations. His 14 points were partly used in the Versailles Treaty. French Prime Minister Clemenceau, who represented France in the Paris Peace Conference. He is known for being a member of the Big Four and advocating harsh punishment for Germany as payment for the damage wrought on France in World War I. He is the one who requested harsher reparations and is partly responsible for the final Versailles Treaty. Lloyd George was the British Prime Minister, representative in the negotiations of the Versailles Peace Conference. He requested that the treaty be firm but just on Germany, meaning moderate reparations and loss of territory. Britain wanted this because Germany was a prominent member of their trading circles, and they couldn't afford to lose German trade. Therefore, they did not want Germany to be economically crippled by the reparations and loss of resources in the form of territory and colonies. This moderated Clemenceau's extreme views. Orlando, the Italian Prime Minister, was brought into the war on the Triple Entente side by the Treaty of London. This is a secret agreement between the Triple Entente and Italy that brought Italy into the war on their side in exchange for significant territorial gains. He was known for being a member of the Big Four and unsuccessfully arguing the terms of the Versailles Treaty. He requested land in payment for Italy, as was agreed upon in the Treaty of London previously signed to align Italy with the Triple Entente. He did not receive the full of his desires, and was not a prominent member of the Versailles negotiations. He also did not speak English. One of the first terms presented in the Versailles Treaty was self-determination, the idea of racial groups sharing territory, language, or religion being allowed to form their own independent states, not being under the rule of another group of people. This was given to Poland, Czechoslovakia, and Yugoslavia. Poland had been divided between Germany, Austria-Hungary, and Russia since 1915, but at the end of World War I, an independent Poland was created by taking territory from its previous rulers, Germany, Austria-Hungary, and Russia, and was given self-determination. Part of this land was the Polish corridor, which allowed them access to the sea. But the Polish corridor also divided Germany from East Prussia, which caused Germany to resent the newly made Polish state. Czechoslovakia was made for the Czechs and the Slovaks out of territory from Austria and Hungary that was taken in the treaties of Saint-Germain and Neuilly. Yugoslavia was created in the Treaty of Neuilly, Trianon, and Saint-Germain for the Slovens, Croats, and Serbs. The creation of Yugoslavia mainly came from the land taken from Austria-Hungary. Under the mandate system, colonies were allowed to achieve their self-determination. It put colonized peoples under a certain country's control for a set amount of time that varied depending on the people's ability to rule themselves. Plebiscites were also a mode of deciding what country a group of people should be a part of. It was a vote for all people in a country or district that expressed an opinion for or against a proposal. These votes, in places like the Saar and Upper Silesia, decided which country would claim the territory. Also included in the Versailles Treaty was Article 231, also known as the War Guilt Clause. It stated that Germany was responsible for World War I and forced them to take complete responsibility for the. Last but not least, on June 28, 1919, the Rhineland was made a demilitarized zone between France and Germany in order to give France some security from German invasion. It remained German territory, but Germany was not allowed to station troops in the Rhineland. France wanted to occupy the entire territory, but instead it was compromised that Britain and the USA would support France if Germany ever attacked them. This treaty greatly endangered Germany, who felt that they were being unfairly punished, accused for the war, and crippled under the reparations as well as loss of land they used to supply valuable resources. Other treaties that dealt with other members of the Triple Alliance were created in the Paris Peace Conference. The Treaty of Saint-Germain. This treaty was enforced on Austria. It included the terms that Austria would lose territory to the construction of Yugoslavia and Czechoslovakia, and Poland and Italy would be given parts of Austria-Hungary, as well as having to accept guilt for the war and pay reparations. They were also not allowed to unite with any other country without the League's express permission, and their arms were limited. The Treaty of Neuilly dealt with Bulgaria. They were made to return Macedonia to Greece, their borders with Yugoslavia were adjusted, and they were forced to accept war guilt and pay reparations, as well as limit their military size. The Treaty of Trianon was signed with Hungary, but was signed later because Hungary was given self-determination. The communists under Bela Kun tried to establish the government. The League of Nations was created in the Versailles Treaty to keep the new peace. The League wanted to increase international cooperation and achieve international peace and cooperation through collective security. The Covenant of the League of Nations established the rules and regulations on how the League would vote on issues and what issues they would be allowed to rule over. Signed along with the other Paris Peace Conference treaties, the Anglo-American guaranteed that the USA and Britain would support France if Germany ever attacked them. This was signed along with the Versailles Treaty, but because the Versailles Treaty was never ratified in the United States, it was not binding, so France was not protected against a German invasion. Toff with Germany to end Russia's involvement in World War I and the Triple Entente. Russia was forced to give up all its territory in the Balkans in order to make peace with Germany. This was later used to show how harshly Germany would have treated the Triple Entente if it had won, and how fair Triple Entente was to Germany in the Paris Peace Conference. That's why Russia doesn't appear in the Paris Peace Conference. The League of Nations was created in the Versailles Treaty to keep the new peace. The League wanted to increase international cooperation and achieve international peace and cooperation through collective security. The Covenant of the League of Nations established the rules and regulations on how the League would vote on issues and what issues they would be allowed to rule over. The USA didn't ratify the Versailles Treaty and didn't join the League of Nations, leaving the League seriously lacking in support. The USA was thought to have created the League, and their lack of support made the League look weak and unhelpful. Lack of strength in the League also led France to find other allies. This led to the creation of the Little Entente in Europe. Russia was excluded from the League of Nations in an attempt to prevent the spread of Bolshevism and communism in general. This caused Russia to view the League as a capitalist club that was trying to stop communism, and they turned to Germany, who was also excluded from the League at the time. This made the Russia-German relationship even stronger. Germany's exclusion from the League of Nations caused them to resent the League of Nations, which wasn't good because Germany was still strong enough to resist them. Contrary to common belief, Germany was not destroyed in the Treaty of Versailles, and since they were forced out of the League of Nations and isolated, they became bitter enemies of the League and the victors of World War I. And since they were still strong enough to resist, it was only a matter of time until their resentment turned to military action. The League tried many times to keep the peace. For example, in Corfu, 1923, the Italian officials were killed by Greeks, and the Italians demanded compensation. Greece refused, and Italy invaded the island of Corfu. The League suggested that Italy leave Corfu and allow the investigation to decide whether or not Greece was to blame and if Italy would be given compensation. Mussolini rejected the idea. The issue was given to the Conference of Ambassadors, and they made Greece pay compensation. Italy evacuated Corfu immediately. This was an example of how the League was too weak to really enforce their laws. Another part of the Versailles Treaty was that countries disarm themselves as far as national security would allow. This was not very successful despite many attempts such as the Washington Naval Conference, the Geneva Disarmament Conference, because the attendees did not trust their neighbors to disarm and suspected that if they disarmed, they would be weak to defend themselves if a country who did not disarm attacked them. Therefore, no one would take the first step toward disarmament, and it was unsuccessful. Two main issues were discussed at the Washington Naval Agreement. A ratio was set for naval expansion to avoid costly naval races in the future, like the one between Britain and Germany. The ratio was set as 5-5-3 for USA, Britain, and Japan, and 2-1-1 for Japan, Italy, and France. The open door policy was also created, giving the opportunity for commercial relations with any country to all nations on equal terms. This guaranteed the territorial integrity of Japan and China, and Japan was forced to return the Shantung Peninsula to China. The Geneva Disarmament Conference was presented by the League of Nations as a means to limit not only naval arms but military arms as well. The participating countries could not agree on the terms of disarmament because everyone felt that they would weaken their countries by disarming. Germany particularly demanded that they rearm because no one was going to decrease their arms to be able to compete with Germany, and Germany felt that they were lowering their national security. The London Conference came together and created the Treaty for the Limitation and Reduction of Naval Armaments. This treaty was made to limit naval power even more and make it more balanced than the previously made ratios in the Naval Conference of Washington. As a result, Japan's naval ratio was adjusted. However, this did not prevent war because countries that didn't participate in it could continue naval expansion and attack the participating countries. Shortly after the failed attempts at disarmament, the Versailles Treaty began to fall apart. The Treaty of Rapallo was made between Germany and Russia secretly and was a direct violation of the terms of the Versailles Treaty. Germany and Russia agreed to cooperate militarily. This surrounded Poland and scared France, which partly led to their overreaction in the Ruhr crisis the next year. In the Ruhr crisis, Germany defaulted on the reparation payments and France occupied the Rhineland 1 month later. The French occupied the territory as a means to get their reparations payments by force. They would take it out of the natural resources in the area. The German people refused to work in the mines, and the French had to work them with their own people, which cost them money and which defeated the purpose of the occupation in the first place. To be paid reparations, the workers were promised wages paid by the German government if they stopped working while the French occupation was going on in the territory. As a result, the French were forced to spend money and work the mines. They didn't gain money out of the occupation. The government started paying the mine employees and had to print more money to cover the cost. As a result, the German mark dropped in value. As the German government continued to print the money, the value continued to decrease. They could no longer purchase goods because their mark was worth so little. This was hyperinflation. The Dawes Plan offered a new payment plan for German reparations, and the U.S. began giving German loans so that they could pay France in reparations. This created a cycle of the U.S. loaning money to Germany, Germany paying France, and then France paying the United States back the money loaned to Germany. The reparations payments became dependent on United States loans to Germany. The Young Plan further reduced the amount due in payments but not the total sum, and increased the sum of U.S. loans given to Germany. This made the reparations payments even more dependent on the U.S. loans to Germany. The Locarno Agreement was a series of agreements between Germany, France, Belgium, Britain, and Italy. It was originally suggested by Gustav Stresemann of Germany. In the agreement, the Western Front was solidified. It was agreed that the issue would be settled by the League of Nations, and Germany was allowed to apply for membership to the League of Nations. This also protected France and Belgium from German invasion. However, the Western Front was never agreed on, and allowed Germany to stretch in that direction. The Kellogg-Briand Pact, proposed by French Foreign Minister Astrid Briand to the United States government, outlawed war between the two countries. With the collaboration of Frank B. Kellogg, the American Secretary of State, they agreed to the renunciation of war as an instrument of national policy. It was extended to over 60 nations. When the Great Depression hit the United States, they recalled their loans, and the system of reparations began to fail because Germany could no longer pay, which meant neither could France and Britain, and the USA began a protectionist policy in order to protect themselves. This killed the overseas market because the US no longer purchased goods. The US also stopped supporting their money with gold. When they had no money, they didn't have enough money in gold to supply the nation. The money became greenbacked. Due to their loss of market in the Great Depression, Japan was in need of natural resources. Manchuria produced almost half of the world's supply of soybeans and had lots of coal and iron supply. Japanese presence in China had been strong following their victory in the Russo-Japanese War and had already established a railway through Manchuria. They invaded on the grounds that the Chinese had terrorized their railway in the Mukden incident, and they had needed to protect their property. The Chinese president presented the case to the League of Nations, but the League was too late in sending an investigator, and by the time he arrived, Manchuria was already occupied. The Japanese renamed Manchuria Manchukuo after they were in control. Why was the League of Nations so ineffective? In the Manchurian invasion, the League of Nations was portrayed as too slow and unable to implement its decisions. The Linton investigation took nearly a year, and when the League ruled that Japan should evacuate Manchuria, the Japanese disregarded it and left the League. The League was unable to enforce its decisions because no one would support them. Most of its members viewed Japan as a valuable ally against the spread of communism and the threat of China. After the Kellogg-Briand Pact and the Locarno Pact, the British, French, and Italians united against Hitler's Nazism, following Hitler's announcement of German rearmament in the shape of Strasserfront. But then Britain and Germany signed the Anglo-German Naval Agreement, which allowed Germany to rebuild its navy to 35% of the British Navy, which was a major triumph for German diplomacy. But Mussolini, Italian leader at the time, felt he had been betrayed because Britain hadn't told its Stresa allies about the decision. Very soon after that, Hitler and Mussolini created an understanding in the style of foreign policy, which became known as the Rome-Berlin Axis. Shortly afterwards, Italy invaded Abyssinia to gain natural resources there. He provoked the Ethiopians to war at the Walla Walla Oasis and then demanded the Ethiopians pay compensation for the dead Italians. Haile Selassie asked the League of Nations to come and intervene, but the League of Nations did not send anyone, and Italy invaded Ethiopia. The League tried economic sanctions on Italy, but it didn't work, and the League admitted defeat in April 1936. The Hoare-Laval Pact was made in an attempt to end the Abyssinian crisis. British Hoare and French Laval secretly promised Italy parts of Ethiopia and Ethiopia parts of British Somaliland. The British and the French public found out, and the pact never came to be. As a result of the Abyssinian crisis, the Italians left the Stresa front and didn't assist Britain and France in the advancing threat of Nazism.